Joey Quinn is almost certainly coming to New York. His best friend just died there chasing Dexter Morgan. He knows Batista was reopening the Bay Harbor Butcher case before he was killed, and he is now a lieutenant at Miami Metro with the rank and history to actually do something about it. So on the surface, this looks like a real fight. Quinn versus Dexter, the last man standing from the original Miami Metro crew, going after the one person responsible for hollowing that crew out over 20 years. Except it would not be a fair fight, not even close. And the reason goes all the way back to a decision Quinn made in 2010 that he has never had to fully answer for until now. This is not about whether Quinn shows up in season 2, he almost certainly does. This is about what actually happens when he gets there, and why the history between these two men makes this less of a hunt and more of a reckoning that probably only ends one way. Subscribe right now. Production is reported to begin around April 2026, and casting news is about to start dropping. You do not want to be catching up. So Quinn might be the most personally entangled investigator still alive in this franchise. The problem is that a big chunk of what he knows, he has been hiding for 15 years. Back in season 5 of the original series, Quinn did not just have a gut feeling about Dexter, he built a real case. When LaGuerta shut him down through official channels, he went around her entirely. He hired an off-the-books private investigator named Stan Liddy and paid him in cash to surveil Dexter. Liddy got photos of Dexter and a woman named Lumen Pierce on a boat in the middle of the night, dropping what looked like bodies overboard. He got footage of them with a knife. He called Quinn and told him to come make the arrest. Quinn did not show up. He had already told Liddy to drop everything because his feelings for Deborah had taken over. Liddy kept going on his own and ended up dead in his van with a single stab wound. Quinn became the prime suspect because of Liddy's phone calls to him and a drop of blood on his shoe. Dexter tampered with the blood evidence to clear him. Quinn thanked him for it, and Dexter pretended not to know what he was talking about. That quiet thank you locked in an unspoken arrangement between them. You saved me, I leave you alone. And it held for over a decade because Deborah was still alive and Quinn had a reason to keep the peace. Then Deborah died in the season 8 finale, and that reason disappeared with her. Fast forward to Resurrection, Quinn is now a lieutenant, the same rank LaGuerta had when she nearly exposed Dexter in season 7. In episode 8, Detective Wallace calls him directly and tells him Batista traveled to New York to unofficially reopen the Bay Harbor Butcher case. Quinn leaves a voicemail on Batista's phone trying to reach him. In the finale, Dexter finds that phone in Prater's vault, hears Quinn's voice, and his inner monologue produces 3 words, I missed them. That voicemail is a strong hint towards where season 2 could go. And there's one more thing that almost nobody talks about. If Quinn kept the photos Liddy gave him in season 5, which is likely given he spent his career as a detective, they could become a serious problem the moment he decides to actually use them. Dexter on a boat, disposal bags, the middle of the night. Cannon confirms the photos existed and Quinn saw them. Whether they are still sitting in a drawer somewhere is the question season 2 might actually answer. Quinn has a lieutenant badge, a direct line to Wallace, who is actively working cases connected to Dexter, and potentially over a decade of physical evidence he never reported. That is a stronger starting point than Batista ever had. The word that complicates all of it is if. Every single time Quinn has gotten this close before, he has found a reason to stop. Quinn's position looks strong from the outside. From the inside, it is sitting on a 15-year-old crack that Dexter is already aware of, and that crack is exactly what the next section is about. Because the reason this likely wouldn't be a competitive fight has nothing to do with Dexter being smarter or faster. It is about what Dexter already knows about Quinn, and what one conversation between them could potentially do to Quinn's entire career simultaneously. Quinn is not coming into season 2 as a clean investigator. He is coming in as someone who has been personally entangled with Dexter multiple times, and Dexter has a clear memory of every single one of those moments. Think about what Dexter actually knows going into any confrontation with Quinn. He knows Quinn hired Liddy to investigate him. He knows Quinn had photos of what looked like body disposal and chose to bury the whole thing. He knows he faked blood evidence on Quinn's shoe to keep him out of a murder investigation, a murder Dexter himself committed. He knows Quinn thanked him for it and kept quiet. He knows Quinn watched him kill Oliver Saxon at the end of season 8 and called it self-defense, when he had enough context to push harder if he wanted to. That is not a neutral history. That is a pattern of moments where Quinn got close enough to the truth to suspect it and chose not to act on it, more than once across multiple years. So when Quinn gets close enough in season 2 to be a real problem, Dexter could potentially neutralize him without putting anyone on a table. One conversation somewhere private, where he lays out what Quinn's situation actually looks like if this goes further. Quinn potentially has photographic evidence of what looks like murder that he sat on for 15 years without reporting. He accepted tampered evidence in a murder investigation that cleared him from a crime that Dexter committed. He watched a man die and signed off on it without pushing harder. Every one of those things, if it came out, ends Quinn's career and potentially his freedom. And Dexter knows all of it. Quinn knows that Dexter knows. That shared history is likely a ceiling on how far this investigation can realistically go before it starts costing both of them simultaneously. That said, there is still a version where Quinn pushes past all of this, goes fully aggressive, decides to burn everything, including himself, to finish what Batista started. That version exists, but it would require Quinn to torch his own career, his own freedom, and his own silence all at once. Given 15 years to choose the opposite, that would be a significant shift. Now compare that to the investigators who came closest to actually bringing Dexter down. Dokes and LaGuerta were far less personally entangled with Dexter than Quinn ever was. Dokes chased him on instinct alone. LaGuerta built her case from scratch with no personal compromises in her history. Both got further than Quinn ever did precisely because they had less personal skin in the game. Even Batista in Resurrection, despite the emotional weight of his arc, came at this completely clean with no history of looking the other way. Quinn had been making accommodations in relation to Dexter since 2010. Not because he's a bad cop, he is clearly not, but because the personal kept overriding the professional every time. That pattern does not disappear because Batista is gone. The investigators who genuinely backed Dexter in the corners were far less entangled with him personally. Quinn's entanglement is both his greatest asset, he knows more than almost anyone, and his greatest structural weakness as a threat, because Dexter holds the receipts on every time Quinn chose to look away. This likely would not be a fair fight, because one side walks in already holding the other side's most damaging secret. Quinn coming to New York matters enormously for the story and for what Batista deserved, but the idea that he poses the same kind of threat LaGuerta or Dokes did misreads everything the show built between these two men across 15 years. And here's where the theory actually gets interesting though, because the most compelling version of Season 2 is not Quinn as Dexter's enemy at all. There is a direction the show appears to be building toward that completely reframes what this confrontation could actually look like. The most interesting possible direction for Quinn in Season 2 is not that he arrives to take Dexter down, it's that he arrives to find out what happened to his best friend, gradually pieces together the full picture, and then faces the exact same choice he faced in Season 5, except this time, there is no Deborah to hide behind. Batista's hotel room in New York is still rented under his name. The evidence wall he built, maps, photos, Dexter's mugshot, documented movements, is likely sitting there untouched. Dexter grabbed Batista's phone from the scene in the finale, but the room itself appears intact based on what the show set up. If Quinn lands in New York, looking for answers about Batista's death, that room is the first logical stop. And that room, if the show follows through on what is built, tells him most of what he needs to know. Wallace in Season 1, holding more open threads than any law enforcement character in this franchise, has carried on into a new chapter. According to interviews with Clyde Phillips, the New York Ripper, Dawn Frampt, is set to appear on screen for the first time in Season 2 after being teased through Prater's files. She has the murder weapon from Prater's vault. She has Batista's body. She has already spoken directly to Quinn on the phone, pulling Quinn into the investigation formally, as the person with the most direct knowledge of the Bay Harbor Butcher case history and the closest personal connection to the dead man is the natural next move the show appears to be pointing toward. Desmond Harrington said at the Scaradise convention panel in October 2025 that he thought the more interesting version of Quinn's return would involve him slowly discovering the truth rather than immediately knowing everything and charging forward. That word, slowly, is worth sitting with. It suggests Quinn's arc is not a sprint towards Dexter. It is a gradual unraveling where he keeps pulling threads that keep leading back to the same name. Masuka being part of this in some capacity, which multiple outlets have flagged as a strong possibility, adds a layer that makes the whole thing land harder. He spent decades as Dexter's closest colleague in forensic, processing evidence from the scenes Dexter had touched or staged. Putting Masuka in Batista's hotel room in front of that evidence wall could mean putting a man face to face with the realization that his entire career was built next to someone who was using their shared department as cover. That specific moment is something the show has circled for years without fully committing to. Season 2 appears to be the place where it finally does. The version of Quinn's story where he is not the villain and not the hero, but the person standing at a crossroads again, aware this time no excuses left, is a stronger story than any straightforward chase. It is also the story the show appears to have been setting up since it brought him back for 2 scenes and a voicemail in season 1. That level of deliberate construction does not usually point towards fan service. Quinn in season 2 is likely Dexter's most complicated relationship, rather than his most dangerous threat. The show has 15 years of unresolved tension between these two characters, and season 2 appears to be where it cashes in. Not with a fight, with a choice that Quinn has been avoiding since 2010 and can no longer reasonably avoid. Now, drop a comment right now. Do you think Quinn ends season 2 as Dexter's enemy, reluctant cover, or something the show has not shown us yet? What he actually does with that hotel room is going to tell us everything about where this franchise is actually headed. Season 2 is likely less about Dexter versus Quinn and more about Dexter hunting the New York Ripper and the killers from Pratter's Files, while Quinn, Masuka, and Wallace slowly close in on a truth that forces every one of them towards a decision they cannot walk back. The production picture for season 2 is fairly clear for this stage. According to reports and interviews with director Marco Sega and showrunner Clyde Phillips, production is reported to begin around April 2026 in New York, with the current target appearing to be an October 2026 release, which would land on the 20th anniversary of the original Dexter pilot, airing on October 1st, 2006. The writer's room has reportedly been active since August of 2025, and according to available reporting, episodes 1 and 2 are set to be written by Clyde Phillips and Scott Reynolds, with Scott Buck, who served as showrunner on the original series across seasons 6 through 8, returning to write episode 2. According to interviews with Clyde Phillips, Dawn Framp, the New York Ripper, is expected to appear on screen in season 2 for the first time. Dexter also left season 1 with the Rapunzel killer, Al Walker, still alive and in his folder after slipping away in the finale. He has a list, a yacht, and a closing monologue about evolving urges. His story is clearly moving forward. Harrison moving towards law enforcement, a direction multiple outlets have pointed to as likely for season 2, sets up a collision that is hard to avoid. If Harrison is trying to build something clean and legitimate, while Dexter is becoming more deliberate and more dangerous, those two paths cannot keep running without eventually crashing into each other. That is the family pressure running underneath everything. Michael C. Hall confirmed in a Screen Rant interview that he is working to bring back a version of the original morning routine intro for season 2, the iconic opening sequence that both New Blood and Original Sin recreated and that Resurrection notably skipped in season 1. That is not a small creative choice. It suggests season 2 is leaning harder into the connective tissue between this chapter and the original run, which lines up with a season that appears to be built around the last 2 surviving Miami Metro originals walking back into Dexter's story in a significant way. Season 2 appears to have more moving pieces than any previous chapter of this franchise. The Ripper as a central villain, a surviving killer from season 1 still unfinished, Harrison's path pulling in a new direction, Quinn and Masuka arriving from Miami carrying grief and unresolved history, Wallace running the most active open investigation any cop in this story has ever held going into a new season. All of it points towards the same man without any single thread being the whole story. Dexter versus Quinn will likely be the emotional core running underneath season 2 rather than the main plot on the surface. The hunt for the Ripper and Al Walker is the story. Quinn standing in Batista's hotel room deciding what to do with everything he finds there is the heart. Season 2 appears to need both of those things to land at the same time. Resurrection Season 1 appears to have built Quinn into the story through 2 scenes and a voicemail specifically to set up something larger in Season 2. That is a very deliberate amount of construction for a character who could have simply been a nostalgic cameo. Quinn is likely not coming to New York as Dexter's primary enemy. He is probably coming as the last person alive who has already been in this exact position, who had enough to act on, looked at it clearly, and chose to put it down. Every reason he had for making that choice before is now gone. Deborah is gone. The quiet arrangement with Dexter is built on a foundation that stopped making sense the moment Batista turned up dead in a vault. This likely would not be a fair fight because it was probably never designed to be one. Dexter walks in already holding what Quinn has been hiding. Quinn walks in carrying grief that is going to make him emotional where he needs to be precise. And somewhere between those two things is a hotel room full of evidence and a choice that, this time, he cannot reasonably walk back from a second time. The show appears to have been building towards this since Season 5. Season 2 looks like where it finally lands. Production, once again, is reported to begin around April 2026. The current target appears to be October 2026, And as I mentioned prior, the writers have been in the room since August of last year. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.